Stage picking is one of the most overlooked parts of metagaming in Smash, especially with amateur players. It's honestly kind of surprising to me that there aren't more resources for stage picking theory, especially since stages are one of the biggest things that separate Smash and platform fighters from traditional 2D fighting games, along of course with percent damage, stocks, and Smash's movement. Over the years, stage picks have become seen as, for most people, either a no-brainer due to the lack of variety in viable matchups, or seen as just personal preference. While some people may think that they just always do super well on a specific stage because they're used to it or practice on it all the time, intelligently picking your stages, character, or playstyle to better suit the current character and stage matchup can give you a significant advantage. Getting more familiar with each stage and how they interact with each character can greatly benefit you as a player. As a disclaimer, I'll tell you right now that a better or more experienced player can almost always beat you, even if you heavily counterpick them, but in a game between more evenly matched players, counterpicking can become the difference between winning and losing. At the very least, learning more about stages will give you a better understanding of the meta behind top-level Smash, and let you curb stomp your casual friends due to their lack of matchup knowledge. Stage picking affects the neutral game, approaches, combos, knockout percent, and recovery, so basically everything. With all that out of the way, which stages should we talk about? Obviously, there are tons of different stages in Smash Ultimate, but less than a dozen of them are likely to be legal in most tournament rule sets. I was originally talking about 10 of them, but the Genesis 6 rule sets came out, so I had to add Castle Siege and Unova Pokemon League. Aside from those, I'll talk about Pokemon Stadium 2, Kalos Stadium, Lylat, Yoshi's Island Brawl, Yoshi's Story, Battlefield, Smashville, Town and City, Final Destination, and WarioWare because even though it's not in the Genesis rule set, I personally like the stage for competitive play. By the way, I'm mostly going to examine this from a hazard list perspective because that seems to be the standard in early rule sets. The three characteristics of stages that I'll focus on are platform layout, stage size, and gimmicks. Certain characters are affected to differing degrees by each of these characteristics, meaning that, for example, certain characters don't care much whether or not there are platforms, but may care more about stage sizes. Certain characters don't really have a strong preference for any type of stage, but it's still important to know about other characters' stage preferences to avoid giving your opponent any sort of advantage. Stage size affects a number of things in both a neutral and punish game. First off, to succeed in a big stage, you need to be able to control space. There are two main ways of doing this. The obvious one is to zone your opponent out by creating a wall of projectiles or large hitboxes. And the other way is to cover an area with movement, as commonly seen in how Melee Marth and Captain Falcon players often dash dance on the other side of the stage to bait an approach and make their own approaches a bit more unpredictable. Both of these playstyles are fine for big stages, but the problem is that zoners might have a lot of room to throw projectiles, but it also gives faster characters room to maneuver around projectiles. To summarize, in my opinion, fast characters and characters that can stuff approaches like big stages, but characters that are easily zoned out or outmaneuvered do not like them as much. Also, edge guarding is in my opinion more important on bigger stages with wider blast zones. This is simply because characters survive longer on bigger stages and thus will be in a disadvantaged state or recovering position more often. I consider big stages to include Kalos, PS2, FD, Town and City, and Unova. Small stages have three big factors to consider. Big characters like Bowser can control a lot of space, but don't have as much room to move around. Combo and rushdown oriented characters are more devastating on small stages because it's difficult to get away from them without going off stage. Close quarters combat is more effective on smaller stages because, well, closer quarters. Also, if you're playing a heavy character like Bowser, or one with a ton of KO power like Ike, small stages will let you KO much earlier. However, when using a heavier character like Bowser or Ike against a character that might have a harder time knocking out, like Young Link or Sheik, big stages will give a significant advantage to the more heavy character because they can survive really long and knock out really early. What balances this out though is that a heavy like Incineroar taking a fast and projectile heavy character like Young Link to a big stage is generally a bad idea because even though Young Link struggles to get knockouts in this matchup, he can easily run away and spam projectiles to get Incineroar up to a deadly percent before ever getting in Incineroar's range. I consider small stages to include Lylat, both Yoshis, WarioWare, and Castle Siege. Obviously, medium stages are a middle ground between big and small, so we'll just call that a standard sized stage and leave it at that. The medium sized stages are Battlefield and Smashville. Stage size affects one more obvious thing, which is knockout potential. I know you've heard me, and I'm sure other Smashers, mention things like blast ceilings, blast zones, or blast lines before. Basically, aside from the actual main platform of a stage is a rectangular space that is surrounded by what are called blast lines, which is basically the boundary where you get knocked out if you pass it. Every stage has differently sized or spaced blast signs, which affect how easily certain moves knock out. For example, a stage with a high blast zone ceiling will make it harder for attacks that send opponents straight up to knock out. First, here are the blast ceiling heights. By the way, I got this data from a user on r/SmashBros, who this guy called Ruben or Ruben Dolls, which has stage diagrams with LVD file visualizations on GitHub. I'll put the link in the description. I found it extremely helpful. So top blast zones are much more similar between stages compared to side and bottom blast zones. By far the highest blast ceiling is on WiiWare, followed by Town and City. Battlefield, Kalos, Smashville, and Unova are just barely shorter, but Battlefield is just a bit easier to KO off the top due to its platform layout. FD is tied with 5 other stages for lowest blast ceiling, but due to the lack of platforms, it's the least easy to kill compared to the other 5 with a 180 unit height. Side blast zones range from 180 to 250 units wide. The thing is, certain stages' main platforms are much wider than others, for instance compared to Kalos to Castle Siege. However, the distance from the end of the main platform to the side blast zone is different. Again, take Kalos and compare it to PS2, and you'll see that Kalos' blast zones are slightly less wide, while the main platform is about the same size. In addition, Kalos' soft platforms hang over the edge of the main stage, so these differences make it easier to get horizontal knockouts on Kalos than PS2. Unfortunately, I don't have much hard data on main platform length at the moment, but the differences in size are relatively easy to notice with the naked eye. The big takeaway is that characters with mostly horizontal knockout moves, like small side blast zones, and characters with great horizontal recovery, like wider blast zones. Yoshi's Story and Yoshi's Island Brawl have all-round small blast zones, with their side blast zones being pretty close, and Castle Siege and WarioWare are by far the smallest in terms of width. I think the number one most underanalyzed part of stage picking theory is the bottom blast zone. It affects how easily downward trajectory attacks KO. When taking into consideration characters that like to recover from far below the stage, or characters that might want to use an air dodge for recovery, large bottom blast zones give more opportunities to do so. Bottom blast zones are one of the last things that should be taken into consideration when picking a stage, but you should definitely be aware of how bottom blast zones affect recovery. Okay, so let me try to answer a common question. In online play, should you set your preferred rules to Battlefield or Omega stages? Really, it should be broken down by character, so generally speaking, why would you or why would your character not like platforms? Obviously, preferences on platform layout are playstyle and experience based, but for scientific purposes, let's assume we're talking about equally skilled players with no personal preferences on stages or playstyle, and that have equal knowledge and access to information on the matchup. Platforms affect the following aspects of gameplay. They let you shark for attacks through the platforms. There's no shield dropping in Ultimate, so being under a platform is a great defensive position. It makes it easier to land after being juggled. Certain attacks go through platforms easier. Platforms can change approach angles, kill options, and combos. Certain combos might allow the opponent to tech on a platform mid-combo, but they can give extra jumps for characters like Mario to continue up air juggling higher up, or allow for platform tech chase opportunities. Finally, platforms give the advantage to characters that have platform-based tech. Shield dropping used to be a universal platform tech, and wave landing on platforms was an essential skill in Melee, but now shield dropping is no more, and wave landing, while better than Ultimate's wave dash, is much more of a situational movement option. Because of this, special character-specific technique that allows characters to easily get on and off of platforms are quite valuable now. So here comes the most opinionated part of this guide. My views on which characters generally prefer stages without platforms, and which characters prefer platform stages like Battlefield to a stage like Final Destination. Again, this is a total generalization because platform layout is just as important as whether or not there are platforms, so I'm really sticking with the idea of Battlefield or FD here. Also, I'm only going over like 60 to 70% of the characters because frankly it would take forever to go through each character. Characters that like platforms include the Marth-likes because they can shark through plats, Yoshi because platforms help with his movement and combos, Donkey Kong, Bowser, and Ridley because they can tech chase well on platforms, Fox and Falco because combos and up airs, Mewtwo, Cloud, Ike, Mario, Charizard, the Pits, Sheik, Bayonetta, Corrin, Ridley, and Peach. Characters that don't like platforms are generally characters with great projectiles, characters that are not easily juggled, or characters that have a great ground or grab game. These include Little Mac because he's terrible in the air, Pichu because her ground and projectile game is sick, Villager, Isabelle, and Duck Hunt because projectiles, Pikachu, Luigi, Young Link and Link, Wolf, Diddy Kong, Pac-Man, Dr. Mario, and Inkling. These are all characters that I don't think really care that much, or they're at least pretty iffy. By the way, Simon and Richter in theory don't like platforms due to their zoning potential, but because of the fact that axes go through platforms, and of course they have access to Leffen or Rexius's instant platform land, they don't really care what stage they're on. Hopefully this gives you some idea on when to choose FD versus Battlefield when you're playing online. Moving on to platform layouts, platforms affect a lot of things in competitive play. There are 4 general types of platform layouts in competitive Smash. The stadium layout is generally the campiest, triplats help vertical moves, a single plat is the sharkiest with the most combo potential, and FD or no platforms emphasizes juggles and ground game. Town and City is situational, and it's a weird one because it sort of fits into all of them depending on if hazards are on or not and what transformation. I'm defining gimmicks as stage-specific characteristics that affect various aspects of play. These include walls, ledges, moving platforms, unique platform positioning, any legal stage hazard, and slopes. I'll be going through each individual stage and mentioning a bit on what makes each stage unique. First off, let's talk about Final Destination. This looks like the plainest stage in Smash, and honestly it is. It's just a big main platform with pretty average blast zones. The biggest notes on FD that I can give are how easy it is to zone characters out, and how easy it is to juggle characters that can't land easily. So characters with long hitboxes and projectiles like the Belmonts, the Lynx, projectile users like Villager, Isabel, Duck Hunt, Mega Man, and a lot of sorties can easily stuff approaches here, and characters that are good on the ground like Luigi and Little Mac, or have great juggling games, love FD. The ledges are pretty darn normal, and there are walls that you can use to help recovery. Also, unlike stages like Battlefield, it's pretty darn difficult to go under the stage to the other side. It's not a huge deal, but Puffs, Pits, and Wario's take note. Onto Battlefield. The 2 most important features to note are the top platform and the ledges. Obviously, the top platform benefits characters that can easily get to the top platform and knock someone out, like Yoshi and Fox, characters that can top platform camp, and characters that have trouble landing. Ladder combos have been nerfed, so the top platform is not as polarizing as in Smash 4. The side platform height is perfect for characters like Donkey Kong and Ike to shark through, also Greninja, and the ledges are a bit different from Final Destination, because certain hitboxes can kinda go through it pretty easily. Smashville is, in my and many Smashers' opinions, the most balanced stage in the game. It's very average size, and depending on where you are on the stage at different times, it's closer to FD, and sometimes it's more like Battlefield or even a small stadium, but with hazards off, the platform doesn't move. It's the biggest tournament legal stage with a single platform, as the only other one is Yoshi's Island Brawl, and it's a great starter pick. With that being said, Smashville is my favorite stage for characters like Donkey Kong, the Lynx, and sometimes the Marios. It's not great for vertical finishing moves, but the platform can help a lot with horizontal knockouts for some characters. Town and City may look like Smashville, and it's about the same size, but it's quite different in a lot of ways. Town and City has probably the weirdest initial platform layout, as it's a tri-plat with high side plats and a low middle plat. It changes between this, no platforms, and a Kalos-like layout. I personally like Ike and Greninja here, but honestly I don't know that many other characters that really like it, but I've seen a lot of Foxes go here. PS2 is one of the widest stages, making horizontal knockouts difficult at low percents. As I mentioned before, the stadium layout is great for campy characters, as you can stay under the side platforms for a slight positional advantage. Fast characters also enjoy the stadium layout because they can cover ground easier. Generally speaking, characters that like FD also decently like the stadium layout. I would say that PS2 is Fox's best stage because of the low ceiling and room to move around. Pichu and Pikachu do well here because they have decent projectiles and are fast. Young Link and Samus really like PS2, and so does Dr. Mario because of pills. And Ike and Cloud like it because they can easily space with aerials and cover the platforms with huge hitboxes. Inkling should in theory do really well here, but it's tough to get knockouts without getting your opponent very inked. I also feel like heavier characters with decent horizontal recovery do well here because of the side blast zones, which is another reason why I like Ike on PS2. I think that in theory Peach and Daisy really like this stage, and it seems like it's Samsora's favorite stage right now, but I'm not really sure. Kalos and Unova are very similar to PS2, but the main difference is their platform layout. Kalos has platforms hanging over the edge, while Unova has platforms a bit higher than PS2. Kalos' platforms can be used for recovery and edgeguard mix-ups, while Unova's platforms are high enough off the ground that even big up tilts rarely reach above them. Kalos is better than PS2 for vertical knockouts from the main platform, and is easier than PS2 to knock out off the side. Unova's blast zones are thinner on the side than Kalos, and has a bit shorter ceiling than Kalos, despite the higher platforms. One thing to really take note of between Kalos and Unova are their ledges. Kalos has a straight wall that can be easily utilized by characters with wall clings or wall jumps. Unova has a smaller wall that has a little bit of jank because characters like Palutena with their teleport recovery have to properly space their up B so as not to pounce away from the ledge in SD. I feel like the pits really like Kalos along with the other stadiums because they can use the side platforms for knockouts and edge guards. Bowser can use the side platforms off his command grab for a much earlier knockout. Captain Falcon likes Kalos because of how fast he is and the wall helps with his recovery. And the Marios also like the side platforms on Kalos or Unova for ladder combos. Yoshi's story is essentially a smaller battlefield with some slight gimmicks in that there are walls that go down to the bottom blast zone and shallow slopes near the ends of the stage. As a character like Villager, Isabelle, Olimar, Duck Hunt, or the Belmonts, this should be one of your most banned stages. For characters that love being right on top of the opponent or can KO early with fast combos and confirms, Yoshi's story is one of your best counterpicks. This is my personal favorite stage with Yoshi due to how easily he can cover the whole stage with his speed. The Marth clones, especially Chrom, love this stage, and I personally think Mewtwo does pretty well here as well, but that might just be me. Wario has a blast here since he can stay right on top of you and get even earlier KOs with or without waft. Yoshi's Island Brawl is comparable in size to Yoshi's story, but its layout is quite unique. Due to its small size, close range and combo-oriented fighters have an advantage on Yoshi's Brawl, just like on Yoshi's story. However, certain heavier characters and characters that lack good projectiles or get zoned in neutral, like Ridley, Incineroar, Donkey Kong, and Ike, really appreciate the middle platform on Yoshi's Brawl. By the way, I've avoided talking about Pokemon Trainer because they're so adaptable and mostly cares about picking stages their opponent doesn't like, rather than one that PT favors, but I like Yoshi's Brawl a lot with Pokemon Trainer. All three Pokemon work really well on this stage in my opinion, minus Ivysaur's projectile game, also it's an especially good stage against zoners. Lylat has 3 low platforms and a slight slope at the edge similar to Yoshi's story. Almost the entire stage has a platform above it, so it's very similar in strategy to Yoshi's Brawl. It's tied for the lowest blast zone with 4 other stages, but it is in my opinion the best Genesis 6 legal stage for vertical knockouts. The sides of the stage are unique in that there's barely any wall for wall jumping or riding up. This makes recovery relatively difficult for certain characters, even though it's not as polarizing as back when the stage tilted back and forth. Despite Lylat's general emphasis on close quarters combat due to the platform layout, the side blast zones are as far apart as Smashville and Town and City, so it's not that small horizontally. Lylat is great for characters that like close quarters combat and can recover horizontally, such as Wario and Jigglypuff. Characters that easily get stuffed by projectiles like Incineroar, and also characters that can shark through the platforms easily. Okay, so I know a lot of people don't like or care about WarioWare, but I truly believe that it's a great stage for balancing out the meta. Its platform layout is a very unique version of Pokemon Stadium, with additional smaller platforms on top. It's by far the least wide stage compared to legal ones, and to balance out the higher side platforms, the main stage is situated closer to the bottom blast zone, giving WarioWare the highest blast ceiling and closest blast floor. All of this comes together to basically form the best stage for characters like Jigglypuff, who usually KOs off the side, gets KO'd off the top easily, and doesn't recover from below the stage very often. Characters that have a really hard time knocking out in this game, like Sheik, can find much earlier KOs here. Characters that can launch their opponents hard off the side at early percents, but don't get KO'd off the top like Ganondorf, also appreciate WarioWare's unique blast zones. Okay, so Castle Siege is weird. This is by far the small stage in the Genesis rule set. This makes early knockouts very possible, and it's a very good counterpick against a lot of projectile characters, or characters that are susceptible to getting rushed down. Castle Siege is not as ridiculous of a counterpick anymore because of hazard toggle, but it is going to be a very commonly banned stage, and will be a pretty strong counterpick once matchups get more fleshed out. Off the top of my head, I can see this being a pretty good counterpick for characters such as Pichu, Yoshi, Incineroar, and Jigglypuff, and a great counter against the Belmonts, Pac-Man, and a bunch of others. Honestly, I don't have much experience with this stage, so there's probably a lot of others that I'm missing, and I wouldn't be surprised if some crazy tech using the slope is found. Castle Siege is not exactly jank, but the fact that it's asymmetric automatically means that players do not start off on an identical or even playing field. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages to being on either side of the stage. So basically, on the right side, you can tech into the ground using the slope, and you generally have better hitboxes and trajectory from the high ground. On the downside, the right side is higher to the blast ceiling, and being high up essentially counteracts the advantages of being a small character that's able to duck under things. On the left side of Castle Siege, you're farther from the blast ceiling and can duck under certain attacks easier, but attacking uphill makes it harder to use most projectiles and long hitboxes. That's all I have for now, so hopefully you take this information and come up with your own counterpicks. Thanks so much for everyone supporting the channel. We're almost at like 300 subscribers now, that's pretty crazy. And I plan on giving you guys some more great Smash content real soon. Peace.